You think time has always existed, stretching back forever, an infinite clock ticking in the dark long before stars, before atoms, before anything. The universe is 13.8 billion years old. Fine. So what was happening 14 billion years ago? 20 billion? A trillion? What was the universe doing before it began? You have an answer in your head right now. Something was there. Empty space maybe. Darkness. Something. Wrong. Not empty space. Not darkness. Not anything. Not even nothing. The question itself is broken. And not broken in some hand-wavy philosophical way. Broken the way what's north of the North Pole is broken. Grammatically perfect. Physically meaningless. Stephen Hawking spent decades on this exact problem. His answer didn't just change cosmology. It destroyed the question. When you understand what he found, you will never think about time the same way again. The beginning of the universe isn't what you think it is. It's stranger. It's more elegant. And it will break something in your brain that needed breaking. Let me show you. Here's what most people are taught. The Big Bang happened 13.8 billion years ago. Everything, matter, energy, space exploded outward from an infinitely dense point. The universe has been expanding and cooling ever since. That's not wrong. But it skips the only part that actually matters. It tells you times what times happened. It tells you times when. It never tells you what when even means at the beginning. It never confronts a real problem. The real problem is this. Time is not a backdrop. It's not a stage the universe performs on. Time is time's part of the performance. It's part of what was created. And if time was created, then the word before, the word your brain desperately wants to use, refers to nothing. It points at a place that doesn't exist. Not a place we haven't explored. A place that times isn't there. Hawking understood this better than anyone alive, and his explanation doesn't just answer the question of what came before the Big Bang, it dismantles the question entirely. Surgically. Permanently. But to see why, you have to understand what time actually is, not what it feels like, what it times is. Start with something you already know even if you don't realize you know it. Think about a clock, any clock, the one on your phone, the one on your wall, a wristwatch ticking against your skin. It does one thing, it counts, 1 second, then another, steady, reliable, absolute. The universe has a heartbeat, and clocks measure it. That's what Isaac Newton believed. He wrote it down in 1687. Absolute, true, and mathematical time, of itself, and from its own nature, flows equably without relation to anything external. Time is a river. It flows at one speed. Everything in the universe rides the same current. The clock on your wall and the clock on Jupiter, and the clock at the edge of the observable universe, all ticking in perfect unison. One universal metronome. Stop and think about how deeply you believe this. You believe it in your bones. You feel it every day. Time moves forward. It moves at one speed. It doesn't care what you're doing or where you are. It just ticks. Here's the thing. Newton was wrong. Not slightly wrong. Not approximately wrong. Fundamentally wrong about what time times is. In 1905, a 26-year-old patent clerk in Bern, Switzerland, published a paper that burned Newton's version of time to the ground. Albert Einstein showed, and this has been measured, tested, confirmed to absurd precision, that time does not flow at one speed. Time is not absolute. Time is not independent of the universe. Time is times part times of the universe, woven into the same fabric as space. Bend space, you bend time. Speed up through space, you slow down through time. Get close to something massive, a planet, a star, a black hole, and time slows down. This isn't metaphor. GPS satellites orbiting Earth right now have to correct for this, or your phone's map would drift by about 10 kilometers every single day. Time isn't the river everything floats on. Time is the water. And the water can be bent, stretched, warped and created. That last word is the one that matters. But we're not there yet. Einstein didn't just show that time moves at different speeds. He showed something deeper. Something that changes everything about how you picture the universe. Space and time are not two separate things. They are one thing. Space-time. A single four-dimensional fabric. 3 dimensions of space length, width, depth woven together with 1 dimension of time. You can't have the space without the time. You can't have the time without the space. They are the same substance expressing itself in different directions. Think about what that means. When you move through space, you're also moving through time. When time passes while you sit still, you're still moving through the time dimension. You are always moving through space-time. Always. You cannot stop. The only question is how much of your motion is through space versus through time. Move faster through space, and you move slower through time. Sit perfectly still, and all your motion goes into time. That's why clocks tick. That's why you age. You're traveling through the time dimension at the speed of time. This has been tested. Atomic clocks flown on airplanes run slightly slower than identical clocks left on the ground. Not broken. Not malfunctioning. Slower. Because a clock on a plane is moving faster through space, so it moves slower through time. The difference is tiny nanoseconds. But it's real. Measured. Undeniable. Space and time are one fabric. And that fabric can't be warped by mass and energy. That's general relativity. Gravity isn't a force pulling you down. Gravity is the curvature of space-time itself. The Earth bends the fabric around it. You fall toward Earth because you're following the curve. But wait. If space and time are one fabric, one thing, then a question about time is a question about space too. What happened to space at the very beginning? Here's where it gets strange. Run the expansion of the universe backward. Galaxies rushing away from each other right now, reverse that. Pull them back. The universe gets smaller, denser, hotter. Keep going. Everything compressed into a smaller and smaller volume. The entire observable universe, hundreds of billions of galaxies, crushed into something smaller than a proton. Keep going. The mathematics breaks. At the very beginning, time zero, the density of the universe becomes infinite. The curvature of space-time becomes infinite. The temperature becomes infinite. All the equations spit out the same answer, infinity. And in physics, infinity is not an answer. Infinity is a sign that your theory has hit a wall. That your equations are trying to describe something they were never built to describe. This is what's called a singularity. In 1970, Stephen Hawking and Roger Penrose proved something remarkable. They proved that singularities are not just a quirk of oversimplified models. They proved that if general relativity is correct, and every test we've run says it is, then singularities are times inevitable. Any universe with gravity and the matter we observe must have begun in a singularity. There's no way around it. The math demands it. Now here's the thing that should bother you. At a singularity, the concept of before loses meaning. Not because we can't see past it. Because space-time itself, the fabric that gives before its definition, simply ends there. Like the edge of a map. Not the edge of the map with empty space beyond it. The actual edge. The place where the map stops being a map. You cannot point to what's on the other side. Not because it's hidden. Because other side requires space-time to exist. And space-time doesn't. But that's still not the full story. Because Hawking didn't stop at the singularity. He went further. And what he found there is the most elegant and most quietly devastating idea in modern physics. Now we're at the core. General relativity breaks down at the singularity. The equations become infinite and useless. So Hawking asked, what if we use a different kind of mathematics? What if we apply quantum mechanics, the physics of the very small, to the universe as a whole? When you do that, something extraordinary happens to time. In quantum cosmology, you can treat time mathematically as what physicists call time's imaginary time. That's not a poetic phrase. It's a precise mathematical operation rotating time by 90 degrees in the complex number plane. And when Hawking did this, the singularity vanished. Not hidden, not avoided. Gone. In imaginary time, the beginning of the universe isn't a sharp edge. It's rounded, smooth, like the surface of a sphere. Think about the South Pole. Stand at the South Pole and ask, what's south of here? Nothing. Not because there's a wall. Not because you can't go further. Because south loses its meaning exactly at that point. The South Pole is the southern boundary of all directions, not the edge of something, but the natural limit of the concept itself. The beginning of the universe is like that. Ask what came before the Big Bang. The question assumes that before exists at the boundary. But at the boundary, time doesn't end. It smooths out into something that no longer behaves like time. The sharp edge becomes a rounded surface. There's no singularity, no wall, no moment where time begins and nothing came before. Time doesn't start with a bang. At times becomes, gradually. The way south gradually stops being a valid direction as you approach the pole. This is Hawking's no-boundary proposal. And what it really means is coming. In your normal experience of the world, time is eternal. It stretches backward forever. Even if the universe had a beginning, time was already there waiting. An infinite corridor, and the Big Bang was just a door that opened somewhere in the middle of it. Something happened times in time's time. Something changed. The universe switched on. That's the assumption. That's what every instinct in your body tells you. It's wrong. Not incomplete. Not approximately right. Wrong in the deepest possible way. Time did not exist before the universe. Time was not waiting. There was no corridor. There was no before the door opened, because the door times is time's time. The universe didn't begin inside time. Time began inside the universe. Let me prove it to you. General relativity tested to 11 decimal places. Accurate enough to guide spacecraft across the solar system. Accurate enough to predict gravitational waves from colliding black holes a billion light years away. Tells us that time is a physical thing. It's part of spacetime. It curves. It stretches. It responds to mass and energy. It is a times property of the universe, not a container the universe lives in. If that's true, and every single experiment we've run says it is, then asking what came before the Big Bang is not a deep question. It's a malformed one. It's like asking what's north of the North Pole. You can say the words. The sentence is grammatically correct, but it points at nothing. There is no location north of the North Pole. There is no moment before time began. Think about what this means. The universe doesn't need a first cause operating from outside time. There is no outside time. The universe doesn't need something to have existed before it. Before requires time. Time began with the universe. The question of what caused the universe dissolves not because we can't answer it, but because the cause and effect framework that generates the question times requires time to function. No time. No cause. No cause needed. Your intuition that something must have come before, that feeling in your gut right now, that this can't be right, that feeling was shaped by evolution. Your brain evolved to plan ahead, to remember the past, to ask what happened before. It's brilliant machinery for hunting and farming and building. But the universe didn't evolve to be intuitive. Here's the truth you have to sit with. There was no before the beginning. Not empty space. Not darkness. Not a quantum void humming with potential. Nothing. And not even nothing, because nothing is still a times when. There was no when. Time itself was part of what began. That's not a gap in our knowledge. At times is times the knowledge. Now here's what people miss when they learn just about the origin of time. They treat it as an isolated fact, a curiosity, about cosmology. Something that happened 13.8 billion years ago, and has nothing to do with Tuesday afternoon. Wrong. The same truth that dissolves before the Big Bang shows up everywhere you look. Inside every black hole in the universe right now, time is doing the same thing it did at the Big Bang, cut in reverse. As you fall toward a black hole's singularity, space-time curves so violently that time itself begins to lose meaning. The equations break the same way. The singularity theorems Hawking and Penrose proved work in both directions, backward to the Big Bang, forward to black hole interiors. The beginning of the universe and the inside of a black hole are the same mathematical creature wearing different clothes. The same space-time fabric that gave time its origin is what you feel when you stand on the ground. Gravity. The Earth curves space-time beneath your feet. You feel that curve as weight. Every time you feel gravity, every single moment of your life, you are feeling the same fabric that stretched into existence 13.8 billion years ago. The same structure that makes, before the Big Bang, meaningless, also makes the universe self-contained. It doesn't need an edge. It doesn't need an outside. The no-boundary proposal means the universe is like the surface of a sphere, finite, but without boundaries. No wall to bump into. No outside to escape to. Complete in itself. The way the surface of the Earth is complete, no edge, no beyond, just surface curving back on itself. And this is happening inside you right now. Every atom in your body was forged in the hearts of stars that lived and died before our sun was born. Those stars existed because the Big Bang produced hydrogen. That hydrogen collapsed under gravity under the curvature of space-time into nuclear furnaces, and those furnaces built carbon, oxygen, nitrogen, you. You are the universe having organized itself into something complex enough to ask how it began. That's not poetry. That's the actual chain of causation. The same space-time that began 13.8 billion years ago, that erupted from a no-boundary origin, with no before, and no outside, is the space-time bending gently beneath your feet, holding you to the ground, flowing through every second of your life. You are not watching time from the outside. You are part of what time is doing. So, what came before the Big Bang? Nothing. And not even nothing. The question assumes a before that never existed. Time wasn't waiting for the universe to begin. Time times is times part of what began. Asking what came before is like standing at the South Pole and asking which way is south. The question feels legitimate. The grammar works. The concept doesn't. But understand what this actually means. This isn't a failure of knowledge. This isn't scientists throwing their hands up and saying, we can't see past the Big Bang, so we'll never know. This is the opposite. We looked at the mathematics of space-time, the same mathematics that predicted gravitational waves, that guides spacecraft, that corrects your GPS, and the mathematics told us the question is malformed. The universe doesn't have a before. Not because something is hidden there. Because there doesn't exist. That's not ignorance. That's one of the deepest things we have ever learned. 50 years ago, this was genuinely unknown. The singularity theorems hadn't been proven. The no-boundary proposal hadn't been written. Physicists assumed, the way everyone assumes, that time stretched back forever. Then Hawking and Penrose sat down with general relativity, and followed it all the way to the edge. And the edge turned out to be a pole, not a cliff, not a wall, not a mystery to solve, but a natural geometric limit, where the question simply stops making sense. The universe is 13.8 billion years old. Before that, there was no before. And the fact that a species of primates, on a small rock orbiting an ordinary star, figured this out, using mathematics, and light, and careful measurement, that is not a small thing. That is everything. That's what the beginning really is. Not the first tick of a pre-existing clock. Not an event in time. The emergence of time itself as natural as the South Pole, being the southern limit of all directions. Not comfort. Not simplicity. Truth. If this changed how you think about time, about every clock you'll ever look at, every moment you'll ever live through, subscribe and share it with someone who still thinks the Big Bang happened times inside times time. That one idea, that time is a container the universe lives in, is one of the most quietly wrong assumptions most people carry their entire lives. What other everyday phenomena do you think hides this kind of depth? Tell me in the comments.